I'm at best, or I can try to see God in the midst of it, what God might be trying to say to you today through it. It could be something like this. Just because you find yourself in a place that seems familiar doesn't mean it's home. And maybe you shouldn't stay there. Say it again. My house looks like my house, but it's not my house right now. It's a construction project that's it's sucking the life out of me. It's making me not a good person. And so, spiritually, I think that same kind of thing can be true for some people. Like, you found yourself in this major, you got like your life's this major mess all of a sudden. What are you supposed to do? I would say this. I would say simplify. In this season of Advent, as we contemplate Jesus, let me ask you this. Are you seeing Him as well as you want to see Him? Are you hearing Him as well as you want to hear Him? If not, change something. Change something. I've still got this major mess on my hands, but I'm not going to let it consume my life to the point that I'm not a husband anymore, or a father anymore, or a pastor anymore. Spiritually, think there are some things in your life that we can learn from both passages we've read today. So all I want to do is look at two things, okay? I want to look a little bit at the shepherds that Kayla read about earlier, and then the disciples walking on that road. Because there's something that we can learn from both of them, okay? If you're taking notes, write this down. Proximity does not necessarily equal priority. Proximity, being close to something, doesn't necessarily equal priority. It doesn't mean you're giving it the importance that it needs. I've been living in my house, but I haven't felt at home. There's some people in this room that are sitting in a church, but you're not close to God. That makes sense? Proximity doesn't necessarily equal priority, and we see that in the lives of the shepherds and of the disciples in different ways. Let me see if I can make it make sense to you. Have you noticed how much in Paul's writings he described the relationship between us and Jesus, the church and Jesus, as a marriage, a wedding relationship? The church is the bride of Christ. Most marriages I know happen in a home, in a dwelling. But there are a lot of people who are married who just live in the same house. Some of you have walked through this before. Just being in the same house. Proximity doesn't necessarily equal priority, because there are a lot of people's marriages that are in pretty bad shape because they're not given the priority that they need. See, I think that's one of the things that God's trying to show me through this whole house thing. It's not about my marriage. It's about prioritizing things that are supposed to be prioritized. See, my confession to you, and the reason I talk about that story, is that I allowed the priorities in my own home to be taken hostage by things that are less important. Thinking that it's going to be better if I just finish this part, rather than living for things that really matter. See, in a relationship with God, it's just like a marriage. The more divided our hearts are, the more distant we feel from Him. Does that make sense to you? Let's see if this makes sense. Intentionality leads to intimacy. If I want to be close to my wife, taking intentional steps towards things she enjoys, making her feel valued, that makes a difference. Guys, they're all like that, by the way. Okay? It's a good thing. Intentionality leads to intimacy. Indifference leads to isolation. You agree with that too? Indifference, you just act like I don't care. Well, things are starting to separate. Guys, your priorities, your purpose, your point of view, all affect the power or the strength of your relationship with your spouse or with God. Priorities matter. And the busier we get, the easier it is to get them mixed up. So as we talk about dwelling in the presence of God this Advent, I'm asking you to learn 2 lessons, one from the shepherds, one from these disciples, and they're really simple. Here's the first one. Are you ready? From the shepherds. See, the shepherds were in a field at night doing their job. So they were on the night shift. It wasn't a glamorous job, but it was what they were paid to do. So God interrupts it with an angelic host, and they basically say, hey, the Messiah is born today. Go find him. Really simple. They weren't in close proximity to Jesus. They were in a field, but their priorities were right. God said go, the angel said go, and so they simply went. Guys, when's the last time you feel like your life was that simple? In the midst of whatever you got going on, God just says, hey, this is what I want you to do, and you just do it. Guys, there's such freedom in that. There is such freedom in that. See, and this is good news for you, because proximity is really more about where you're going than where you are at that moment. See, being close to God, some of you think, I just don't feel close to God. Which direction are you going? Because if one step towards Him means proximity is getting closer. Okay? We can learn from the shepherds that even if you're in the middle of a field and you don't even know where to exactly find Him, are you willing to go scour through every barn, every manger in Bethlehem looking for a baby? If God says to, it says they did it with great joy. And they couldn't stop talking about it. Guys, it is possible to find joy in what God's called you to do. I mean, if you're like me, you grew up going to a church where somebody screamed at you all the time, made you feel bad, and it's like there's nothing, like, guys, the Psalms say, at His right hand, joy's unending. Pleasure's unimaginable. It's not like God's wanting to punish you when He asks you to do something. It is possible to find great joy